All right, good morning. My name is Rebecca Kuyava, and I'm the president of the board of directors of the Phelan Pinion Hill CSD. I'd like to thank you all for coming out this morning, and I'm glad that my request for cloud cover and a slight breeze worked out.
Yes.
I hope you all had a chance to get some ice cream. It looks delicious. And now, if you could please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. And now I would like to introduce our general manager, Mr. Don Bartz.
Great applause. Thank you. Thank you. I'm Don Bartz. I'm the general manager of the CSD. I've been the general manager since 2008 when the district was formed. So I've been around quite a while. I've seen growth in the community and some lack of growth in the community, but a lot of positive things that we've seen out here over the past few years. I'd like to make some introductions. I have Rebecca Kuyava, who is our board president. We have Dave Nielsen, Sheep Creek board member. Joe Tapia, general manager for Sheep Creek Water. And Hector Cazares, the honorable attendee today from the State Water Resources Control Board. And we also have Sean Wright, the water operations manager for the CSD. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the proposed consolidation, and then I'm going to let Hector come up and talk about the consolidation from the state's perspective. And Dave Nielsen, or the manager from Sheep Creek, will also have an opportunity, and I'll follow up with that. At the end, we will have a question and answer time. Some people submitted some questions online. Some filled out a blue card that you can pick up over here if you have specific questions that you would like to. And with this large of an audience, we could probably accommodate questions out of the audience too if something comes up and you don't think about it ahead of time. So we've been working on the consolidation for a number of years. Actually about 2 years working with the state. Hector's going to get into the background a little bit about why we're doing this, but it's a long process. And what we're looking for is what is the best option for the community that benefits both districts. So how many are Sheep Creek customers in the audience? Okay, quite a bit. And how many are CSD customers? Okay, we got a few of those too. So everybody is going to be concerned about how does this affect me, my family, the amount of money that we spend for water in the community, and do we have water available? So everybody has those concerns, and I appreciate you taking the time to come out on a Saturday. Actually a halfway decent day. We'll try to wrap up at a fairly decent time so we don't cook everybody. But does everybody here realize that you are all part of the CSD to begin with? So we have two different water districts. One is the Phelan Pinion Hills, the Community Services District, and the other is Sheep Creek Water. So the Phelan Pinion Hills CSD covers the area of Sheep Creek, and we're already providing parks and recreation, solid waste, and street lighting for the whole community. So this would be one more service that would be combined with the rest of this. So we've got a lot of information to cover today, and I think I'm just going to start off and let Hector kind of cover his end of it, and then we'll go from there. And up next would be Dave Wilson. Hector, come on up. You can sit down there if you'd like to. Okay. I can take it.
All right, can anyone hear me? I do have some handouts to go along with my presentation just so you guys can follow along. and they're going to be passing those out around right now. My name is Hector Cazares. I'm from the State Water Board, Division of Drinking Water. I work for a unit that is referred to as SAFER. It's a newly created unit. It's only been around for about 2 years, but our focus is to work with small disadvantaged communities that are experiencing either a water quality or water quantity issue. And, we try to guide these projects along into the most sustainable options and hook them up with funding that's available. Today I'm going to be talking about Sheep Creek, giving a background of the compliance issue that they're experiencing. I'm also going to summarize other water system deficiencies that Sheep Creek Water Company has, just to give you guys a comprehensive overview and understanding of kind of everything that needs to be addressed in the water system. And then I'm going to go over the solutions and alternatives that are still being considered to resolve this source capacity issue. And then lastly, I'm going to just hit on the next steps that we're taking at the water boards and the rest of the stakeholders involved in the project. The next steps that we're taking to resolve all of this for the community. So to give a little bit of background, Sheep Creek Water Company, it serves nearly 3,400 people through its 1,180 service connections. Its service area is encompassed by Pinon Hill CST service area, and the CST serves nearly 23,585 people through its 7,147 connections. So Sheep Creek's sources comprise of 5 groundwater wells, and those wells are located south of the system in the Wrightwood well field. They have 1 newer well in the Mojave Basin Alto sub area. That one was permitted and constructed in 2018, and 1 tunnel source that they rely on as well. So Sheep Creek Water Company's most critical deficiency is its lack of enough source capacity. The historical production records show that great variability in the water board. The historical production records show a lot of variability, and the water board is concerned with this data because it limits Sheep Creek's capacity in being able to supply reliable drinking water to the community. So on August 22nd, 2018, Sheep Creek Water Company reached out to our office, the state water boards, letting us know that there was an impending water shortage. The production was at critical low, and the water company had to resort to its emergency interconnection with Phelan in order to keep supplying the community for a couple of days during that time period. So on August 31st, 2018, our office issued a compliance order due to this notification of the impending water shortage. And Sheep Creek's water companies, we also issued the compliance order because of the violation with state source capacity standards. Now, how the source capacity standards work at the state and the regulation is that we determine good source capacity by a measure that's called the maximum day demand. The maximum day demand is calculated by looking at the past 10 years of usage in the water system. So we look at the past 10 years of production, and we look at the highest day in those 10 years, and we say that was your highest demand for your system. You should always be able to meet that demand at all times in case of any emergency or in case that you reach those levels again. So it provides a good safety net in how much a water company could produce by using that high 10-year max day demand. So Sheep Creek Water Company, they've historically had production periods where this standard is not being met, consequently placing the community at risk of another impending water outage or shortage in the future. So the graph that is included on the handout on the first page, that depicts the overall decline and fluctuation of the system source capacity from 2009 to present, measured during the month of July. So July is one of the most critical months for high demand throughout the year. So that's why we've chosen this month to demonstrate the year-to-year comparison in terms of production for Sheep Creek Water Company. Now the solid line represents that the average production values in gallons per minute being produced by the water company. And the horizontal dashed line, that's the threshold that Sheep Creek Water Company should be meeting at all times. That max day demand that we were talking about, That's what we want the water company to be over all the time. And that's what's going to ensure greater security in the community's water supply. So as you can see, during the time period between 2016 to present, the water company hasn't been able to produce over this amount during the months of July. Production did hit an all-time low in 2018, as we mentioned, when we issued that compliance order. And they were increasing for a short time period between 2018 to 2020. But it seems like we're at another decline due to the new period of drought that we're entering. So there is a data point being reported at the very end of the graph for 2022. I know we're still in July. That one was estimated based on the prior months this year, comparing values from last year, 2021, to this year, 2022. Production values are shorter, like 7 to 10% compared to where they were last year. So they are at a decline, and that 2022 value was an estimate. So, and lastly, the dashed trend line is an arrow that was calculated. It's a calculated average, and demonstrates that even though there has been periods of increased production, the trend is still declining overall when you look at the whole time period. So overall, the figure establishes that Sheep Creek sources, they're heavily impacted during drought conditions, as experienced during the past 10 plus years. And since the occurrence or length of a drought is really unpredictable, these sources are continually susceptible to producing record low flow rates, as we experienced back in July 2018. So due to these elevated concerns for water capacity, a service connection moratorium was also issued with that compliance order. I'm sure many of you guys are aware of the service connection moratorium. With the declining and unreliable water production trends, the service connection moratorium, it had to be instated so that future development and growth wasn't taking place in a community that is already susceptible to water shortages. So we do have that in place until a solution is reached. The compliance order has a return to compliance deadline for Sheep Creek Water Company for the end of December, for the end of 2023, December 2023. Whenever we do resolve the issue, that's when the moratorium will be lifted and growth and development will be allowed in the area again thereafter. So feasibility, since the compliance order was issued, the state has been working with a lot of with both water systems and a lot of other stakeholders in reaching a solution to all of this. So a feasibility study was completed by Infrastructure Engineering Corporation, IEC, now known as Ardura, and it concluded that Sheep Creek Water Company would either need to install an additional 3 to 4 wells in order to be sustainable, or agree to consolidate with the CSD in order to address this water capacity violation. So I'll speak a little bit more about this when we reach the portion of the handout that compares the alternatives. But before that, I did want to touch on all the other deficiencies that we have listed out for the water system. So other than the inadequate source capacity, and this is on the back side of the handout, a study completed by CRWA in 2018 determined that certain areas of Sheep Creek Water Company's distribution doesn't have adequate fire flow due to undersized pipelines. There are California fire codes that require hydrants to supply a certain capacity, which is not being met in parts of the distribution system right now. And although our office, Division of Drinking Water, doesn't enforce the fire code standards, it's an important upgrade that needs to take place because you know it needs to be addressed for the safety of the community. So other issues that the water system has is some areas of the distribution have pipes and valves that may be beyond their useful life, requiring replacement. And there's also a significant amount of customers with meters that are outdated and need to be replaced as well. Other deficiencies in the system is that there's a few areas that experience inadequate pressure during periods of low production. So during these periods of low production, operators have to either manually adjust valves in order to make up for the pressure in these areas. There are 2 small areas identified in the report within the distribution system that are affected, but that's capital improvement that needs to take place and be addressed for the system. Also for the storage tanks, a lot of the storage tanks are over 30 years old. Inspections reports show that there's leaking tanks, tanks are no longer up to the new standards that we have for newer tanks. So there is a lot of room for improvement in the storage tanks that Sheep Creek has. And the system is also in need of an upgraded communications and control system. So due to the lack of a central control monitoring system, operations are based on daily manual checks, and implementation of a new control system would enable remote monitoring process control and better data acquisition for the system and provide timely notification for problems and alarms. An example of where this could have been really useful is that several years ago, Sheep Creek Water Company, they experienced a valve that froze on their storage tank 6. That did happen overnight, and because there is no communications or alarms or anything to alert the operators, it wasn't until the next day that they realized the tank had been overflowing all night because of that frozen valve. So when you have a communication system in place, it immediately notifies responsible staff, and the issue is able to be resolved in a timely manner rather than having wasted all that water overnight and into the next day. So that's just an overview of all the deficiencies that should be addressed. All of these are very important, and Sheep Creek Water Company needs to be working towards a solution for all of these as well. It's just a source capacity issue as the highest priority at this time, and once that's resolved, all these other things need to be fixed and addressed for the better of the community and the water system. So I'm going to go into the recommended alternatives now and comparing the two recommended alternatives. The feasibility study report that IEC completed for us back in 2019, it recommended that the most sustainable solution for Sheep Creek would be to consolidate the system to the CSD, along with addressing the remainder of the system improvements that need to take place. So it's the State Water Board stance that the formation of a consolidated water system that includes Sheep Creek Water Company into the CSD service area will provide a significant increase in technical, managerial, and financial capacity, and that just results in greater water security for the community as a whole. So findings of the feasibility study are kind of summarized in the table on the backside of the handout. It does have some estimates on capital costs for the project. These are estimates that were given to us back in 2019. So unfortunately, they are outdated, but they still serve well in comparing the costs of one project to the other. So one project being the consolidation with the CSD, and the other project is where Sheep Creek Water Company would remain its own self-sustaining system and would install enough sources to address the source capacity issue, which is estimated to be about 3 to 4 wells. So those are the costs for comparison. And then we've also split them up on that table for you guys in terms of what it would cost per service connection. Now, this wouldn't be like a one-time fee that's paid per service connection, but it would be over a long period of time. If you notice on the last column, it addresses the funding that's available. If the consolidation goes through, the state is able to, the project is eligible for grant funding from the state. So all the capital costs could be covered by the State Water Board. If Sheep Creek Water Company decides to remain its own water system, our Division of Financial Assistance has already communicated that they'll only fund the best, most feasible long-term sustainable solution, which in this case would be consolidation. So Sheep Creek Water Company would have to resort to self-funding that, and it rests in their leaders' decisions and in how the finances would be split amongst the customers and paid throughout a longer period of time. But the community would have to take on those costs in order to install the needed wells if that's the option that they decide to pursue. Let me see if I had anything else to speak on the cost.
Has the grant been approved then?
I think we'll get to questions at the end, but I do have an answer for that. So I can talk a little bit more about that. And I think I'm going to hit some points at the end of my presentation on that as well. Yeah, just like I mentioned, the final decision, it rests with Sheep Creek Water Company and its elected board members. So once DFA provides a response on what they're working on right now, we've said that all the costs, capital costs that it's going to take to make the consolidation happen are eligible for grant funding. The thing that we're discussing right now is a transfer of water rights. Sheep Creek Water Company has some water rights that, as part of the consolidation project, would need to be transferred over to the CSD. And at the request of Sheep Creek Water Company's board members, they've asked to see if they can fund the transfer of those rights, and the state can pay fair market value to transfer those rights from Sheep Creek to the CSD. That's still in talks with Division of Financial Assistance. We're not sure if we're able to fund something like that. We haven't funded anything like that in a project like this in the past. So it has moved up the flagpole. A lot of upper management people are trying to make that decision at this time. Now, the board members at Sheep Creek said if they don't get funded for the water rights, their plan is to move forward in drilling the wells and trying to keep Sheep Creek Water Company self-sustainable. So that brings us to the next steps. Our Division of Financial Assistance is expected to reach a decision on this within the next 1 to 2 months. Once Sheep Creek Water Company reaches a final decision on consolidation, they'll either move forward with the formal consolidation agreement and submit a construction application to our Division of Financial Assistance for the project, or they'll move forward in self-funding the construction of the additional wells that are needed. DFA has asked me to communicate to you guys. They're not here today, but they've asked me to communicate that they're committed to working with the communities of the CSD and Sheep Creek towards the consolidation, and they'll continue to provide input on the construction application as that is developed. If Sheep Creek Water Company does agree to the consolidation project, then DFA will need to review that construction application. That usually takes about 9 to 12 months for them to review and set up a funding agreement. And then we can move forward with any of the construction that needs to take place, which is about another year thereafter. So overall, for the timeline for consolidation, we're looking at like maybe 3 to 4 years from now to complete the project. Now I'd like to read a statement that DFA provided to me before I let you guys go. They sent this to me because they weren't able to make it today. Overall, it's the policy of the division to encourage water system consolidation whenever it provides for a more sustainable water system to ensure the human right to water, especially among small community water systems serving disadvantaged areas such as Sheep Creek Water Company. Many small community water systems such as Sheep Creek struggle to meet minimum state and federal requirements that provide safe and reliable drinking water to the community. It's our belief that the formation of a consolidated water system will not only provide greater water security for this community, but it'll also be a promising solution that will address many of the other difficulties faced by Sheep Creek. So that's all I had for my portion of the presentation. I thank you guys for listening and for coming out, and I will be available for questions after we get through everybody. So thank you guys.
Joe, did you want to have an opportunity to speak?
I don't know if you guys want.
Okay, Dave, come on up.
Oh, I gotta go up
Oh,
there.
you can come up here, or you can sit there if you like, either one.
First of all, I appreciate Hector coming today. Thank you, Hector, for being here. I greatly appreciate that. Hector has been willing to meet with us, and so he's been very helpful. First thing I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce Andy Sodi. He's the president of Sheep Creek Water Company. Also, we have another board member, Kelly Williams. Would you stand up? I'd like to also say that if the state of California is going to fund this project, the request that Phelan Community CSD is Pinon Hills CSD's put to the state, we're on 100% with the consolidation. If they don't fund it, then we're not in favor of the consolidation. And so that's where we're at. We've been 1 year, we've been talking, we have monthly meetings, we go, and that's the question I ask them every month is, are they gonna fund the purchase of the water rights or not? And what the deal is Sheep Creek Water Company a few years back was appraised at $24 million. The water rights were appraised for $13 million and $13,030,000. And so when we first got back and we got together with the CSD, and I appreciate Don Barks, he spent a lot of time on this. We've been negotiating and we came up with what we considered as a working agreement. What we would do is the actual portion of the water district, the water lines, the properties, the trucks, everything else. It was appraised for about $12 million. If you join the CSD, they charge you $8,000 for a meter hookup fee. And so if you take that times our 1,300, and we have 1,365 meters, not all of them are active, it comes out to about the same amount of money. So we would get fair market value for those assets. And so we're in 100% agreement with that. And then our water right, we have a water right that we can use up to 3,000 acre feet in the canyon, and the water right is in the El Mirage Basin area. I didn't know that until we started this consolidation project, and that's a good thing to know. It's an adjudicated right that was given by the Superior Court back in 1931, which makes it a very viable water right. The other thing we need to thank Mr. Johnson back in the day, he filled out all the paperwork correctly. Because they've looked at this, they've had two legal firms look at our water right, and they both come back and they say the water rights are good, that they did all the things back in 1925, 1990, all those things were done correctly, and our water rights are valid. And so it's an important thing. I don't have to tell anybody here, water rights on the edge of the Mojave Desert is an important asset. And the shareholders, I wrote all of you that are in Sheep Creek, I wrote you a letter, and I said that if we can get fair market value for your water rights, I think this is a good deal. Now, the other things I'd like to talk a little bit, Hector went through the deficiencies of Sheep Creek and our production. Since we put on our new well 11 down by Smoke Tree, right now we're producing about 1,900. We have the capability of producing about 1,900 gallons per minute. That's been pretty consistent. When we went back and calculated out that 1.9 million, our maximum day demand, it comes up to about 1,300 gallons a minute. And so we've been at that come September for 36 months. And so we've been producing. The last few years have been dry. I can't predict what next year our production will be, but I can say that we're in much better shape than we were. When the water tables, we couldn't figure out what happened, because in May we had the capacity of pumping 1,300 gallons per minute, and then by July it went down to 550 gallons per minute. It just fell off a cliff. We never thought it would go below 1,000 gallons a minute, but it did. And so we couldn't figure out what was going on. So we went in and we looked at all of our wells up in the canyon, and we've completed rehab on all the wells except for one. I think that's going to be done next week. As we go in and we clean it out, of all you people here that are in Sheep Creek, you know we have a calcium magnesium carbonate issue. And at the bottom of those wells, there's perforations through the casing, and the water goes through. The only thing we could figure out is that those wells were getting a little plugged up with some of our good Sheep Creek calcium, and it was plugging up those perforations. So we're cleaning them out. That's one of the reasons that our production has come on. Plus the new well that we brought online, we're pumping right at 300 gallons. We go down there today, and the way it was designed by our staff, it works really well because we inject it directly into the line. It takes care of about 40% of our water company, and it's been working really well. And so that happened. The other comments that were made that I need to address was one on the fire flow. It is true that some of our lines are 6-inch lines, and they won't flow 1,000 gallons a minute, which the state's requiring for the fire hydrant. But I will tell you, they will flow 700. When they were installed, they made all state requirements. And we're upgrading those all the time. We upgrade about a half a mile to a mile of new line, and we've been doing it for the last 3 years. We've been budgeting about $150,000 a year to upgrade our water system, and we've been doing that. You could ask Joey, he can give you all the data of all the improvements we've made, and they're substantial. And so we're doing that, and we're kind of committed as a board that we're going to increase that up to about $300,000 a year over the next 5 years. so we could make these updates. Over a 10-year period, that gives us about a $3 million income stream, which is about the same amount as what the engineers say that we need to do to take care of some of these other deficiencies. Now, let me talk about fire flow a little bit. We've had several fires in our area. Just a few weeks ago, we had the sheep fire up in the canyon. We provided water. We were one of the water companies that were a major contributor to that firefight. We have a meter on Desert Front Road. It's outside our district. We want to be good neighbors to our community up in Wrightwood, Pinon Hills, so we installed a high volume hydrant there. They use that hydrant. They use 2 of our hydrants on Highway 2. They actually went up to our tank up in the Sheep Canyon, and they were using that hydrant. They got as much water as they needed as they possibly could take out of those, and we provided every bit of that. We also, during the Blue Cut fire, they had a fire came up, burned up over 400 homes down in West Cajon. When they got up here where there's public water systems, the CSD, Sheep Creek, Wrightwood, they all provided water for that fire flow, and they got that fire stopped. Another one that occurred was the Scalp fire, and this was a few years back. Sheep Creek was another big contributor to water to that project. We've never charged them a dime for it. We just appreciate the fact that our firefighters went out and put those fires out, and we just thought it was part of being a good neighbor in our area. But we've always met that demand, and we'll meet it in the future. And the last one, when they had the sheep farm fire, a lot of the power poles into Wrightwood got burned up. We didn't have any power to our well field, but we have 1 million gallons of storage up there. And what happened is we took our generator, we have a contingency plan. We went up there, we ran our generator. We can run up to 2 wells off of our generator. And that's all we're pumping in the canyon right now is 2 wells at a time. And we provided the water that they needed. So I've heard a lot about fire flow. The people in this community have met the demand for the firefighters, and we provided that fire whenever they've needed it. One of the things that we're very conscious about is we keep our tanks full in the summertime. We know a fire can erupt at any time, it can anywhere in this area, and we want to provide that water. The other thing that was mentioned, some of these deficiencies over a 10-year period, according to the engineering that we've had, and I got to compliment the state on this consolidation project. They've done a good job with their engineering report, and it's a good one. We have it on our website at Sheep Creek if you'd like to look at it. And we think with about $3 million, we can upgrade all those systems. So this is where we're at, is if they fund the project to purchase our water rights, I'm sure we can approve it. The other thing that was said, that this was dependent upon the board of directors of the Sheep Creek Water Company. That's not exactly correct. It'll be dependent upon the vote of all the shareholders. This will be a shareholder decision. We've made that quite clear all the way through the project. And so I don't know where we're at. I can't read the state of California. I've been asking them for a year. Dolores is here somewhere, and I ask her every month, are they going to fund this project or not? And so far I haven't gotten an answer to it. But we're running out of time, because what Hector said was that by December of 23, we have to have these deficiencies. We are on schedule to start drilling 2 wells. We have the land, we've done all the environmental work, and if we can't get a decision from the state here in the very near future, the wells are going to go in this next year. And we're going to meet the demand. Sheep Creek will not allow the Sheep Creek Water Company to be in violation of their order. And we're just going to find out where we're at on that. We don't know how much water these wells will produce, and we won't know that until we drill the well. The cost of the wells, we know exactly what they cost. So far, drill a 1,500-foot well, that's how deep the one is down on Smoke Tree. It costs us about $1 million a well. It was $1,000,060. That was the bid that we received, and you've got to put a pump in it. And we can't get a price on the pump, but it'd be around $300,000. If the well produces 250 gallons the pump will be much smaller than if it produces 500 gallons a minute. But we're going to do that, and we're going to provide it. There was a thing that there'd be additional costs to the water users. Sheep Creek Board has gone through. We're using Tier 3, which means people that are using someone else's water. We're using those fees and those funds, and we're escrowing those accounts right now. We're using those fees to pay this project. We've already priced in the cost of repaying the loan. They said the state of California won't give us any money. They've made that very clear. But we've already obtained the funding from the federal government. We've already have that. It's sitting there. We can do it at any time. It's not a grant. We have to pay interest on it, but we only think we're going to need to use about half of that, because once we find out how much water they produce, we'll be back talking to Hector. Are we meeting the maximum day demand? Right. When that maximum day demand was calculated, that's when the school district was upgrading all their grass, and we were telling them, because one thing with our tunnel, we can't turn it off. The water just keeps coming. And so what happened is we were asking people to use as much water as they could, and they did. And so Serrano High School replaced all their football field, all that. That was 8 years ago. I think it's 9 years now. And they used a lot of water. And that was 1.95 million gallons per day. Currently, we're less than 600,000 gallons per day. So it's been a substantial decrease because we've cut the allotment to match up what is going in the canyon. Also, our allotment is being determined by what at that low mark of 550 gallons a minute in the canyon. That's where the allotment is based on, is that 550 gallons. And so on the first share, you get 700 cubic feet out of the canyon. And then on Tier 2, you get another 150 feet. Most houses, and I have several rental properties in Phelan, can, if you don't have a lot of landscaping, you can do just fine on 1,000 cubic feet per month. And so that's where we're at. Again, I'm 110% in on consolidation. But if it doesn't happen, and if the state doesn't fund the project, I'm going to be the first one to say we need to go ahead and move to meet the compliance of the state. We're not going to put the Sheep Creek at risk with the state of California. We won't do that. We have the funding, and we're going to do it. We've been very clear with them, and we're getting to the point now that we're going to be a little bit more bold, that we're going to move forward if they don't make a determination whether they're going to fund this project or not. Again, I'm 150% in on consolidation. I think it's in the best interest of our shareholders and our community, but they've got to fund the project. If they don't fund the project, then I don't think it's in the best interest. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Dave. That's very good information. I just want to start off and give a little bit of a history of the CSD. As you know, the Community Services District took over from the county special districts, and it was Zone L and Zone G. And our district was formed in 2008 when it separated from special districts. So in comparison, some of the questions we have is, could you take on this type of a system, and how would you go about doing this? Do you have the experience? We have really good experience in doing this. The Zone L system that we took over had been neglected for a number of years. When we took over, we had to rebuild every well in the system. We wanted to do more than just the basics to keep the water system flowing. The county had never looked at growth, what that looks like in the future, or for meeting the changing regulations of the state. If you've been following for any period of time, some of the regulations that the state's put out there, we have to comply with, whether it be source of supply, the contaminant of the year that they come up with and that you have to address. We have to be prepared to take care of all of that. The tanks that we took over from the county, they were peeling. The paint was peeling on the inside and the outside. The inside was just dirty. You look at a rehabbed tank where they've recoated them, they look like an operating room. I mean, they're just pristine inside compared to what they were in the past. The booster pumps that we have throughout the system, were in disrepair and needed to be rebuilt and replaced. The meters that we had were up to 30 years old, very similar situation, and we went through and replaced all of the meters in the system. We are in the process now of completing the second round of meter changes. We've been here for almost 14 years, and the new meters are going in. We can read the meters without even driving down the streets. We can notify you if you have a leak. So when we're talking about updating the meters with the Sheep Creek system, there's a lot of things we can do that instead of reading once a month and catching a leak that's already been in place for 3 weeks or so. The computers, the control system, and equipment were East German surplus, I think is what we took over from the county. So it was pretty bad, honestly. So the types of districts that we have, there's two. They are separate, different types. Sheep Creek is a private mutual water company, so it's privately owned with 8,000 shares. Those 8,000 shares are for the water that you have and also for your voting that you have to make different decisions for what the future looks like. The large shareholders have a lot of sway. The school district is one of the ones that I think one of the largest shareholders, and they have used a lot of water over the years, and they acquired hundreds of shares to be able to meet their needs. The schools, for the most part, are now on the district system, which did take a load off of the Sheep Creek system, their production necessity. The community services district is the form of local government. We are independent from the county, independent from the state. Even though we are regulated still by the state, we follow the same regulations that Sheep Creek does. So that is the common denominator there. Our board is elected by the community. We have board meetings twice a month. You can come in and talk to the board. If you have a question, you can come in and talk to them. We have meetings twice a month. They represent all customers equally. So it doesn't matter if you have 1 meter, you have 5 meters in the system, you might have some rental homes. You would have the same access to the board and vote based on being a member of the community. Again, Sheep Creek is already members of the CSD. I covered that earlier, that we covered with Parks and Recreation and Solid Waste and Street Lighting. One question that has come up, and I want to address this right from the very beginning, is our water funds can't be used for funding parks. So, as we're getting ready to build a new park here in the district, which if you look at the property we have over here to the east, and all the way down to the school, including the 5 acres next door, we have a master plan for parks, which should be funded through different funds. Finding the money for that is quite a challenge. It's about $30 million worth of parks that we're looking at, but it's going to bring something back to the community. And this is something where your water rates will not be funding the parks. It just can't be done because they're restricted funds that are separate. The water supply for Sheep Creek, they've already described that pretty well. They have the tunnel and the wells up in the canyon. The CSD gets its water from the regional aquifer. And one of the questions that comes up is, do we get water from the aqueduct? We do not get our water from the aqueduct. Planning to the future, that is a possibility, and that would be recharge basins that have been pilot projects in the west side of the district over towards the LA County line to actually take water from the aqueduct, put it onto the ground, let it soak into the ground and recharge the aquifer for the future for the district. Now, when we're talking about how much water is available or how much water is necessary, the CSD uses about 3,000 acre feet of water per year. So if you were to take a 1 acre piece of land and fill it 3,000 feet deep with water, that's how much water we produce to our customers in 1 year. It's a lot of water. The capabilities that we have with interties from City of Victorville, from Zone L, our wells in LA County, we can produce up to 8,100 acre feet of water a year. So we've planned well for the future. So going back to the 3,000 feet of water, make it 8,000 feet of water. And if you can imagine what that looks like, that's a lot of water that would be available to the community. How did we get to consolidation? Hector gave a good explanation of that, so I'll skip some of my notes with that. but they really came up with the two different alternatives. The first one is maintain Sheep Creek Water as a private water purveyor by drilling and operating additional supply wells. The second alternative was consolidation with the CSD. In September of 2020, the boards agreed that we would look at the consolidation and have been working with the state. The state has been very generous in this process. We're talking millions of dollars for this. Anything that you're doing now, especially with the cost of living and everything, is going to cost a lot of money. The state has put in over $1 million so far just for this study to determine what's needed and how to go about that. So that is substantial. So the report is nearly completed. There has been $23 million worth of improvements that have been identified that would be proposed for part of the funding of this project. I can't guarantee that all 23 million, and I don't think Hector is willing to write a check today or swipe his credit card in the district machine.
I want you to do that, Hector.
But there's $23 million is a lot of money. The state realized that Sheep Creek couldn't make all of these improvements, that $23 million worth of improvements, or $5 million worth of improvements without hardships to the customer. So I want to break that down a little bit, what that could look like. And they developed a plan that would really cost nothing or next to nothing for the districts to consolidate. And going back to the alternatives, the first one is maintain Sheep Creek as a private water purveyor. And the first part of that would be fixing only the wells. And that's estimated $5 million. The state had a little bit higher number. I think they were $6.5 million for getting the wells back to where they need to be to provide water to the community. And it could be paid for if they did it on their own with assessments on shares or tiered rates, or it could be done by meter. They would choose how that's done. The CSD does not have any say-so in how that's done. But if you were to divide up the cost of that $5 million between the number of connections that Sheep Creek has, you'd be looking at about $625 per share if you divided it up by the 8,000 shares, or $4,200 per customer. So each meter in the system, in order to fix those 5 wells, from the numbers that we have from the reports and the discussions we've been having for the last 2 years, would be quite expensive. A new buy into our system, if you were to build a house in the CSD system right now, costs you about $9,000 to $10,000 to get a new meter set, which pays for some of the infrastructure that's already in place in comparison. So it's pretty pricey. If you were to do the second step, which would be the other things that Mr. Cazares talked about, which would be the wells, some of the fire lines and stuff like that, you could be looking up to $14.67 million to do just the phase 2 of that. If you were to break that down into the assessment cost, it'd be $1,833 per share, or about $12,000 per meter. There's going to be arguments both ways back and forth, but I'm taking the numbers from the reports that we've been working with and the proposed funding that the state has put out there that we're proposing with the state. If you were to divide it up that way, that's one way. The other option would be tier 3, that Mr. Nielsen talked about. Tier 3 may be very expensive. I don't know how many people fall into the tier 3 or not, but that would be for them to answer. If you add up the two together, you'd be about $16,000 per customer to do all of the shopping list that's been identified by the engineers and by the state of improvements that could be done to the system. Alternative 2 is consolidation with the CSD. I think this option would greatly benefit not only the CSD customers and the Sheep Creek customers, but it would do a lot of things for the community. Most customers would have reduced rates. You would have the same rates as the CSD customers. It would be one system. It's not going to be us and them. It is the community, and it is a system that serves the community. So there's not somebody's not going to have some extra assessment somewhere. We would propose that everybody is paying the same rates. Our customers right now pay a lower rate than the Sheep Creek customers. If you own less than 10 shares, your cost of water is going to go down. And depending on how much improvements are done over the years, it could be substantially less. There's no fees to connect to the CSD. We would welcome you in, and the process would start. It's going to be a long process. It's not going to happen in 6 months, but it could get going. New supply wells could be done in the system, and that would be funded by the state. We could drill one well down in our system and move the water throughout the entire system. These systems would be piped together so the water could be moved around. We have better options for drilling water. The further north we go, the better production we get. Up here, you might get 150, 200 gallons a minute, maybe 250. We're in the process right now of drilling a new well, and we're hoping for 1,000 gallons a minute from this new well. So we're in the process right now, separate from the consolidation, just for the CSD to buffer our supply. We talk about fire flow. So fire flow, I can't argue at all. The system was designed for a certain amount of gallons per minute for fire flow. But when you start looking at the downtown area of Phelan, anytime any development comes in, they have an extraordinary amount of money just to develop. Right now there's a moratorium on, but as part of the proposal that we put in with the state is we would want to see fire flow increased, 12-inch lines put throughout downtown to be able to serve new businesses. Right now, the new businesses can't come in. Even if they could get a meter, it might cost them a few $100,000 extra just to meet their fire flow requirements. And you start tacking that on top of all the county requirements for streetlights and everything, and it really makes it unbuildable, and the town is just going to kind of wait for years until it can develop. We talked about new meters, storage tank repairs and improvements that we covered, and we get into the moratorium, I think, almost immediately. We would talk to the state if this is going through, they sign on the dotted line. Even before all the improvements were done, the moratorium could end, because we have the source supply to cover the districts. If we're one district, that's a possibility, and we would seek to end that immediately. No new assessments, and existing assessments would be paid off as part of the process. So how does this benefit the CSD customers? Because there's two sides to this. We want to be fair to Sheep Creek customers, and we want to be fair to the CSD customers. We have a 10-year capital improvement plan, and that involves millions of dollars in improvements that we do to the system. We've done that for years, and since 2008, we have that 10-year capital plan in place for drilling new wells, coating the tanks, fire flow, new lines, pressure reducing valves. We have to do that, and we want to maintain that looking to the future. There's also a consolidation incentive that would be available to the community if this were to happen, and that would be $10 million at 0%. And that could be used for water improvements for the system. As we go into the future, looking at the capital improvement plan, if you're paying 6% to borrow money, you're going to be paying $10 million. You're going to pay $600,000 a year just in interest. So that's a huge boost to the community. How does this benefit the entire community? I'm wrapping up here so we don't have to stay out here too long in the sun. Again, we're one community. It's not us and them, not two different districts. We're not fighting back and forth, which actually the districts get along really well. But when you start doing improvements to the systems, it's for the system. It benefits everybody. All customers will have equal say about the costs. If you don't like what the board is proposing in their budget, come in and talk to the board. You have the opportunity to voice your concern under public comment, and the board will listen to you. Grants and 0% interest loans are available for the entire community. A resilient water supply. So we're able to meet the supply for the entire community, both districts combined. Transparency, come to the board meetings and talk to the board. Homes could be built with the moratorium ending. Commercial buildings can resume and home values can improve. I've talked to quite a few people who want to do improvements to their homes and they can't get a building permit because of the moratorium. So it's not only new construction, but I believe that it would affect existing construction too, pulling permits. To sum this up, the reality is the system needs work. There's no question about it. How it can be done is going to be up to Sheep Creek and the community and to our board and our district customers. There's no reasonable, feasible way that the community could make improvements to the system that would cost $16,000 per customer. It's just never going to happen. It's not feasible. $5 million, would it be feasible? I'm sure it could be. That's, that would be something that could be worked out. Again, though, that cost would be about $4,200 per meter. However you divide it out or stage the construction and the debt, that would be fine. The state is willing to fund a project the members of the community can't afford. Bottom line. Money is available now from the state. It is a process. And if we let this opportunity pass, it's going to cost more for everybody in the community. It's going to cost more for the Sheep Creek customers. It's going to cost more for the CSD customers. And this isn't just about now. This is looking at home prices in the future, building in the future, development. It will be years before any new development can happen if we don't act sooner than later. And really, the community has one chance for this. I don't know that this money is going to be available in the future. The bank account for the state of California goes up and down. And right now, this money looks like is available. And we don't want to miss this opportunity. Look, if you look at the money that we can save, this would benefit everybody. So we need to find a way to make this work. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Rebecca. I know she has a few question cards. And then we'll be happy to take the questions as they're presented, whether it be Hector, you can take yours, Dave, you can take the Sheep Creek questions. Sure. And then so we'll go from there.
All right, so I'm going to read the questions. I think a lot of these questions have been answered, but you let me know if you want them to expand on some of these. And if some of these are repetitive, then we'll just skip them, okay? So the first one says, how will CSD source more water as population grows? Logic says price will go up and we will get less water.
That is a great question. We do have sources of water. So looking to the future, for future growth, Mojave Water Agency is the water master for the area. We have quite a bit of water rights that we've acquired over the years. We actually spent millions of dollars buying additional water rights. They are being ramped down by Mojave Water Agency. But to address the future, we have well 14, which is in LA County. We have water rights to pump up to 1,200 acre feet of water in LA County. And we're not even pumping that right now. We're adding to our existing supply here. We have the rights to pump over there. It's already built into our rate structure for that additional water that we would need. In addition to that, we also have connections with Victorville, which is also part of the adjudicated area with Mojave. And we're able to bring water from other sources.
All right, can both Sheep Creek and CSD please let us know their system's ability to have proper fire flow in their water systems? I believe you covered that.
I just want to cover one other thing. If you build a private home in Phelan, and it doesn't matter if you're in the CSD or in Sheep Creek, because we're in a high fire danger, everybody here has to sprinkle their house. That's the mitigation. So if you're in Sheep Creek and you can flow 700 gallons a minute, they're going to make you put fire hydrants in, or fire sprinklers in. If you're in the CSD, and I built 9 of them over west of town here, and they were all in the CSD, they didn't care what the fire flow was. The county of San Bernardino made me put sprinklers in each house. And so that's the mitigation factor. And what he said is correct for the commercial people. You don't know. When they built Stater Brothers, the fire flow that they required was 700 gallons a minute, and Sheep Creek supplied that. The last one, when they did the Rite Aid over here, it was up almost 3,000 gallons a minute that they wanted. And what they did is the developer had to hook 2 or 3 of our lines together to get that, but they did. We have 4 million gallons of storage up on the hill, and if you put it together, you can get that flow. At one time, me and my brother owned 160 acres in the city of Victorville, and the way we wanted to develop that property, which we did, the city of Victorville required us to put the sewer system in and the water system. It was up to the developer. So that's Sheep Creek's policy. If you want to put in a commercial operation, then you have to upgrade the water system to meet whatever the county of San Bernardino is going to require you to do. It'll be your cost. And the developers are well aware of that.
All right. Will Sheep Creek Water commit to drilling all wells required and repairs to systems as required by state? I believe you had already touched on that, correct?
Yes, we will.
Thank you.
We're going to keep Hector happy.
You have mentioned a few times that other water companies have shown interest in buying Sheep Creek water. Who and for how much? Where are they? Will they need to raise costs to bring us up to standard?
There's been several people that contact us, and that's information that I'm not going to give out at a public meeting. But they're all private companies, and I don't think that's the best solution. I'm with Don. If the state will fund this project, this is the time to do it, and they need to consolidate the two systems together. I think it would be a disaster if we sold this to a private water company. Some of our members in the community are right with, they're owned by a private water company, and you can talk to the water users up there about how that's going.
Okay, this says this question is for Dave. What makes the CSD think they are capable of taking on Sheep Creek and its problems?
Yeah, as we talked about in my presentation earlier, when we took over from the county, we basically had a couple of weeks to put together staff and run the system. We were able to do that, I think, flawlessly. With High Desert Underground was involved, and we took over 7,000 connections with just a couple weeks preparation. At this point, we have the backbone of the system in place, and we could add to the system easily without any impact to our customers.
Okay. Is it true that shareholders earn money from loaning money to Sheep Creek Water?
In the past year, some of our shareholders did loan money directly to the Sheep Creek Water Company. We offered it to all shareholders at our annual meeting, and they helped us out dramatically. They loaned us money, unsecured money, at 3% interest, so to do some of our infrastructure, which we paid back. All those were paid off about 3 years ago, and I wouldn't put our shareholders back in that situation ever again, because people were around, they were insinuating that something wrong was going on. The other thing I want to say is I've never loaned Sheep Creek one penny. I've given a lot of my time. I've wore out 2 or 3 pickup trucks. I don't know all the costs it's been to be on the board, but it's been an honor and a privilege to serve the people of the community of Phelan. And I'm honored to do it, and I'm honored that they give me that opportunity every year. And so I think it's an unfair question, but actually the people helped us out a lot. If you know anything about loaning money, to borrow unsecured money at 3% interest, that's pretty crazy.
I'm going to assume this question is directed for Sheep Creek. Is the water safe to drink because of all the problems with the system?
I got Hector here pushing the button for me. Thank you, Hector. It is. Our water's tested all the time. Our water is really safe. The only thing is it's hard. It's got calcium and magnesium carbonate in it. You know, if you watch the info commercials in the middle of the night and they're grinding up the coral reefs in the South Pacific, they'll sell you a little pill for a bottle of them for about $20. That's magnesium and calcium carbonate. And so our water comes from up there with the White Rock, which you mine is up on the hill. And so we do have calcium. But the one thing about Sheep Creek, we don't charge you 1 extra dime to put that calcium and magnesium into the water.
I believe we answered this. If consolidation is proved, when will moratorium be lifted? We answered that. Thank you.
Hopefully as soon as possible.
Right. Okay, this is a question from a CSD customer. Why would we in Pinon Hills want to do the merge? They have had so many problems and their prices are high and they have water shares.
That's a great question. If the districts were consolidated, the rates would be the same. There's a cost savings for our customers. There's parts of the Sheep Creek system that can benefit the CSD, and there's parts of the CSD system that can complement the Sheep Creek system. So going back to the 10-year capital plan that we have, you could save millions of dollars just in improvements that wouldn't need to be made due to the fact that the state is willing to fund, hopefully with grants, the improvements to the systems.
Answered that one. Is there a possibility of another compliance order after the current one is lifted because of all these deficiencies you mentioned?
So for like,
Can you hear me?
there?
Yeah.
All right, so for the remainder of the compliance item, for the remainder of the deficiencies that we talked about, like the fire code regulations, that's not something that's regulated by the State Water Board, but we do encourage the water system to do that improvement. Other areas in the distribution system that need to be improved and storage tanks, we'd be working and encouraging the water company to address those. But we wouldn't be issuing any kind of compliance orders until there's like a dire state of emergency for those storage tanks or a failure were to happen. That's just how it works when in terms of regulating infrastructure. So we wouldn't be looking to issuing another compliance order for any of the other items that we spoke on, but we would be working closely with the system to make sure that they are addressing those and continuing to make strong recommendations to get those completed.
I just want to add to it, Sheep Creek, if the consolidation doesn't happen, if the state doesn't fund the project and it doesn't happen, I can, this board member I can speak for, we're going to do everything in our power to meet all the requirements that the state has and any of the recommendations. We have the engineering, we have a plan to do it. We plan to do it over a 10-year period. And we're very close. We want to use about $300,000 a year to make those upgrades. Right now, we're budgeting about $150,000. Over the next 5 years, we're going to need to increase that a little bit to get us up to the $300,000 and make those corrections. But we're committed to making all those corrections.
This is directed to Sheep Creek. Is it possible we drill the wells and still not meet the state's requirements?
No one knows when you drill a well if there's water there or not. You don't know. It's always a gamble. But what we do is we've identified 4 sites. We have 2 sites that are up on this end of the town, and we have 2 sites down where we drilled the other one. We've done all the environmental work for all 4 sites. When they drill the well, the people that drill it, they watch the soil samples as they're going. And they have an idea whether you're in water-bearing soil or not. And so if we drill the well and they don't think there's any water there or there's no potential, we're not going to case it. We're going to cover it up and then we will move to another area. But we have 4 sites that we've identified. When we calculated out, we wanted to get about 500 to 600 gallons a minute in this area. So if something happens up in the canyon like we just experienced with the fire, it burned up the power, and we needed water, we can get it here from the ancient water that's below us and not be 100% committed to the canyon.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add on to that a little bit. The compliance order that we issued, it has like a specified amount of water production that we want to see out of these new sources. And the engineering reports that our consultants have done, they're the ones that have estimated that it's going to take about 3 to 4 additional wells to reach that specified amount. The estimate came from looking at the most recent well that Sheep Creek Water Company installed, their well 11, and kind of looked at the production that we got out of that one to come up with that estimate. So there is a specified amount. Hopefully, the amount of wells needed would be around that range. But if it turns out that there needs to be more than 3 to 4 wells to reach that capacity, then we will have to hold the water company to that until they reach that specified amount that's on the compliance order.
Okay, just a couple more. To truly know wishes of shareholders and customers, are you willing to allow a consolidation vote by household/meter rather than by share? If not, would you allow a no proxies vote?
I think they're this is on.
I think they're talking about the Sheep Creek bylaws. In order to do anything like that, you're going to have to change California state law, how private companies are run. And you can ask Mr. Musk, who's trying to take over Twitter, how that all works. But it is a private company, and the shareholders have a vested interest. And it's outlined in the state law how that's done. And to change that, you'd have to change state law. So you'd have to start at Sacramento first.
Okay, does the water board, and I assume they're talking CSD, have the authority to require the Sheep Creek Water Company Board of Directors to place the consolidation agreement as approved by the state before the shareholders vote?
I'm going to toss that one right over here to Hector.
I think I can answer it.
It says, does the water board or the CSD have the authority to require Sheep Creek Water Company Board of Directors to place the consolidation agreement as approved by the state before their shareholders vote?
We do that.
So the state does have mandatory consolidation authority in some cases. For this particular project, we're not able to apply that because it's not a water quality issue. So we wouldn't step in to mandate the consolidation at this point in time.
Okay, and last question, will there be future public meetings with the CSD and Sheep Creek Water, and most importantly, will there be ice cream?
Not making it so.
Yeah, I would like to say yes, as this progresses with the state and we see what they're proposing for funding, there will be discussions. We'll probably have some community meetings, maybe at one of our board meetings, but it will definitely be out there in the public, and look for our websites, look at the agendas, and everybody is welcome to come and voice your opinion on that. Sheep Creek customer, CSD customer, everybody is welcome to come in and talk.
Yeah, and from my part at the State Water Board, our unit's really focused on working with these communities, increasing transparency to you guys, and giving you guys all the information that you need on the projects. So that's why I'm here in my role, and you can count on me in attending any of those community meetings if needed.
And to address the ice cream issue, we may have a little bit of ice cream left over today. I would encourage everybody to go get some ice cream. It's already paid for. Enjoy it. I know you're baking out there, and thank you for sitting out there in the sun for this long. But we'll see about having ice cream available too.
It's the important things. All right, if your question was not answered, I tried to consolidate them if they had already been answered by all of the representatives or not. We do have a mic available if you want to step up and ask a question while they're here.
Can you just explain what exactly the Sheep Creek Water District is, where it is? And number two, what is the downside of consolidating? I haven't heard it.
The Sheep Creek Water Company basically encompasses the downtown area. We are in Sheep Creek Water District right here at this location within their boundaries. Dave could give you all the physical streets where the boundaries end, but the CSD completely surrounds Sheep Creek Water. The CSD is 128 square miles, which covers all the way down to the other side of Palmdale Road, almost up to Wrightwood, Baldy Mesa Road, and the county line. And Sheep Creek falls within the middle of that district. And as far as the downside to consolidation, I haven't heard a downside at all. As Dave said, he's 110% in for this. The issues with the water rights need to be resolved. That will take some time. But other than that, there is no downside that anybody has identified or voiced concern about.
Yeah, the management of Sheep Creek Water Company might change a little bit. Don spoke about how the CSD runs and works. That'd be the only shift that is really going to be experienced by the customers. Other than that, I mean, the state has nothing but encouragement and benefits for this consolidation project to happen.
Are there large developers moving into this section? Is that part of the push for this?
There are no large developers that we've even heard about that are interested in developing in the community. If you look at the community plans, they're 2.5 acre minimum parcels for the majority of the district. And when you look at large developers coming in, they would want to have zoning changes done to be able to do high density housing. We have nothing indicating there's even interest in that.
Okay, I have a question that wasn't answered, and this is directed to Sheep Creek Water. I know you've talked about going ahead and drilling the wells, and I tried to get this answered at our shareholders meeting, but I wasn't able to. You said you had property in mind that you want to drill a well. One, how much was that property? And as a shareholder, I think that we deserve to know the cost of the property. Two, the comment was made by the board that you believe there is water on that property. What testing by a professional, and I don't know what they would be called, a hydraulic company, I don't know, by a professional firm was done to say, oh yes, this piece of property has pretty good odds of having water on it? Or was it just, we like this piece of property, let's hope that there's water on it? And I really am curious as to how much we paid for that property.
To answer your question, the 4 well sites, one would be on the existing property that we own at where the tank site is. The other well site that we're looking at is in Horse Canyon, right up here on the corner of Sheep Creek, and it's in 330 feet. It's right on Horse Canyon. Sheep Creek Water Company ran water down Horse Canyon for about 50, 60 years. 500 gallons to 300 gallons a minute for many, many years, probably. And so we think there's water there. The property owners had a geologist that says there's water at 350 feet, but you don't know until you drill the well. Now, this is Sheep Creek's experience. We have 5 active wells up in the canyon. We've drilled 7, and 2 of them weren't producing enough water to produce it. Both of those are when we had the professional geologists come up and find our water for us. The ones that we drilled in areas that were likely that there'd be water, we've had substantial wells. Some of those wells are producing right at 400 gallons a minute. The other property that we have is on Johnson Road down by Yucca Terrace. Again, it's in Horse Canyon. It's closer to the well down the thing. And I believe we paid $25,000 for it. We bought another one that's over by Beakley Road, and it's down further in the system, and we paid $20,000 for that 2.5 acres. The property that we have here, the 5 acres, we have an agreement with the owner that if we drill a well and there's no water there, we give them back the property and they get a meter from Sheep Creek, and we won't purchase the property. If there's water there, we're going to pay $200,000 for it.
For the piece of property, 200,000.
Yes, it's a commercially zoned piece of property, and so that's it. When you drill a well, it's a gamble. Don't think anything less than that. And we think there's water there, but we won't know until you drill the wells. And geologists will come out and they'll tell you that they'll predict that there's wells that in this study that they did, they think there's water there too, that the states put together. They think there's water on the property. How much, who knows?
Hi, I had a point of clarification. Hector, it sounded like you were saying that funding approval would come after Sheep Creek agreed to do the consolidation, where it sounded like, Dave, you were saying that Sheep Creek was waiting to hear that the funding would go through before we would put the consolidation to a vote. So I was just kind of curious what the actual process for that was.
Yeah, I can clarify that a little bit. I think right now our Division of Financial Assistance, and I don't work for our Division of Financial Assistance, just a disclaimer, but I can't answer the questions to the best of my ability. What DFA is doing right now is determining what's going to be eligible for the project. So we've already determined that capital costs that it's going to take for the consolidation, that's an eligible cost for the project. That's going to include all the interconnections that are going to take to hook up the two systems properly, any other water infrastructure that's needed to make it possible, like pump stations and all of that. And our consultants engineering firm has all of that outlined. So all of that's going to be eligible cost for the project. What we're determining right now is if the water rights are going to be an eligible cost. We don't typically fund water rights transfers, so we're looking at how to do that right now and if we're even able to do that, and that's the decision that they're making right now. So that just determines eligibility. Then if they are eligible to cover those costs as well, it's as Mr. Nielsen has communicated, that's when they would go into the consolidation agreement. An application would be put in to our Division of Financial Assistance. They'll review it, and once they approve the application, that's when they issue a funding agreement. So that's when funds are approved for the project, and that's kind of how the process works. Once the funding agreement is issued out, then the project can move into the construction phase, and construction of the consolidation can take place. So I hope that helps address the question a little bit in how our process works. I don't know if that was clear enough.
So just one quick follow-up. So, I mean, there's already quite a significant consolidation plan online. So there's an application on top of that. Can the funding amounts change through that application?
They can change determining on like how if like costs go up for certain projects. We have had to amend funding agreements because of increase of costs. So that is something that our division addresses. Yeah.
I have more questions about the 23 million. So you have the number comes from year 2019, I believe.
The 23 million was a couple different parts of the program that were combined that were estimates put together by the engineer. And those did change. One of the questions over the past year was the increase in the cost of wells, goods and services going up. You know, you're looking at additional for PVC pipe has almost doubled over the past couple of years.
Yep.
Well casings have gone up, and that's where those numbers came from.
Okay, so since right now we're in 10% inflation. Over the next 3 years, times 3, that's 30% inflation. Will California give us more than 23 million? Will the CSD back out of this, or are they committed once they go forward? That's assuming another $6 million. And then there's always cost overages. Where does the money, where's the possibility of the funds to come from?
To try to answer your question, the CSD would be cautious, along with Sheep Creek too, about the amount of funding required to do the project. Once the state, or once the consolidation would start moving forward, the state determines how much funding. There would be negotiations on cost increases because the cost estimates definitely went up from the time we started the project. It was a $10 million project, $13 million project, $17 million project, and it kept growing. Whether it's going to be the whole 23 million would be funded or not, I can't guarantee that any more than Hector can or would want to right now. But definitely the cost of goods and services would be calculated into what we're dealing with. Because if you need $1 million to drill a well right now, in another 2 years, it might be $1.4 million. You're going to see definitely some increases coming.
Would CSD proceed forward if this was an additional $5, $10 million?
The CSD would look at it carefully and determine what is in the best interest of the CSD and of Sheep Creek. Nobody wants to get into something to where it's going to cost a lot more money than we thought it would cost, but we would proceed cautiously in consultation with DFA.
Yeah, so I think a lot of this is contingent on the grant funding to make it possible. In terms of the Division of Financial Assistance process, projects that end up going over the initial estimated costs usually go to the water board for special approval. We have had projects that have, increased costs from when the initial assessment was completed out in the Coachella Valley. I think we have a lot of consolidations that got approved at a higher cost. So it just has to go through a different process. But it is possible that we cover that increased cost at this time. I'm not going to put my name on the line or anything for it because it does have to go through the process for approval. But it's something that has been done, and that's how that case is kind of handled.
I think we're done.
Okay. Does anyone have any final remarks or wrap up that they wanted? Somebody has. Thank you. I hate reverberation. Everybody's good?
I just want to say, I'm 110% of consolidation as long as the state funds it. And I think it's to everybody's advantage. But that's where we're at. Is the state going to fund it or not? If they not, then it's not going to be a good thing. But if they fund this is good for the community. I can tell you that.
All right. We thank you all for enduring the heat. My clouds are dissipating. Thank you so much for coming out, and please get more ice cream. I don't want to take it home.